I pay my obeisance to my most revered, my Guru, His Holiness Acharya Sri Mahashramanji. A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participating delegates from all over the planet Earth. I hope consciousness must have become a very trending word by now in Miami. What is consciousness? Is mine like yours? Is ours like that of animals? And the biggest question of all, does it emerge from the complexity of brain functioning? These questions have intrigued humans not only for some years or centuries but for millennia. It is also now a very frequently used word in both the fields of science and philosophy. But the understanding of its existence, whether it is eternal or at some point it ceases to exist, what it actually is, and very importantly, the approach taken to understand consciousness differs greatly between the two fields. Usually, consciousness is associated with the state of being conscious or being aware or responding to one's surrounding. But does that make someone in coma or in effect of anesthesia consciously dead? Or if consciousness is the awareness of one's existence, like I am, therefore I exist, does that make animals or just born babies devoid of it, as they probably may not be aware of their own on their own existence? So defining this seemingly undefinable thing has apparently been a very challenging job, but also an important one. Looking into the matter wearing the glasses of Jain philosophy, consciousness is not something that can be separated from a living being. Being a living organism and possessing consciousness is all the same thing, irrespective of whether one is aware or unaware of its own existence. This inseparable entity of a living organism is called Chetana. And to be very clear, this Chetana necessarily differs from the state of being conscious or being aware. Thus, it is not a state but an attribute, a characteristic to all living beings. And when I say all living beings, I even mean those living beings who do not have brains, who don't have mental faculties, and don't have the power to reason. I would like to give you an insight into a dialogue which took place around 2600 years from now. It is a curiosity raised by Gandhar Indrabhuti Gautam, who was one of Bhagwan Mahavir's most learned disciples. He asks that, O Lord, do those living beings devoid of mind and brain, incapable of undertaking locomotion, can they experience pain? And Bhagwan Mahavir replied that, Gautam, yes, they can experience pain. And in another answer to Gautam's query whether those living beings are conscious of their experiences and whether they can articulate their sensations, their experiences, here Lord Mahavir replied in the negative. These dialogues suggest a very important thing about the role of the brain in experiencing pain and pleasure. First, you don't need brains to experience something. But when talking about the articulation of our experiences and being conscious at the moment of experiencing it, this is where the brain kicks in. Those living beings who are devoid of brain and mind can experience, they have sensations, they can feel pain and pleasure, but they cannot articulate their sensations because they don't have brains. But in case of those living beings who have brains, they can differentiate between itching, a sprain, or a fracture while also experiencing the same. Jain philosophy also discusses about how do those living beings experience pain, and when they do experience, at what intensity. They also discuss that what type of emotions or instincts do those brainless creatures have, and so on. Now, After the experiments made by Professor Marcel Vogel and the famous American botanist Cleve Baxter and many such botanists, now these emotions and instincts are also observable in plants also. So these revelations made by Bhagwan Mahavir were really, really impressive, at least for me, because it has not been much more than a century from now when scientists discovered life in plants. And on the other hand, such detailed descriptions of the secret life of those brainless living creatures is, and that also made thousands of years ago, is really very fascinating to know. Now, coming to the approach problem, according to the principle of Anekantvad, truth is multidimensional. There are myriad ways to understand a same thing, and smart people understand that there are limitations to how much one can obsess over. Researchers may focus on a particular aspect, but that is definitely not the whole story. We've been much like that old lady who once lost the key to her house, and she was finding it outside under a street lamp. A passerby asked her that, "Lady, what are you finding?" She said, "I lost the key to my house. I'm finding my key." So the passerby asked that, "Where did you lose it?" The old lady said, "I lost it somewhere inside my house." So any genuine reply would be, if you lost your key inside the house, then why are you finding it outside the house? She replied, "Because it is dark inside." So we are looking at all the wrong places the wrong way. There are some entities which are gross, others which are subtle, and still others which are formless. The first can be known by gross means, the second by subtle means, but we cannot know anything about the formless entities because we don't have the means of knowing them. Suppose there's a mango before me, I can feel it, I can taste it, I can smell it because it is gross. On the other hand, if we talk about atom, it is a subtle entity. It might not be visible to the naked eyes, but using a magnifying apparatus, it might be possible. But here we are talking about non material, we are talking about non physical entities which are not only subtle but also formless. So, if we keep studying the objective way, what we'll find is that how does it take place? How can we influence it? But what about the question why? So, I see two ways. The first one might be like we can either experience it ourselves. Suppose, like becoming monk, like me, I have dedicated my life to spirituality, to meditation, and the discovery of my true self. So either you can become a monk, maybe a monk who did not sell his Ferrari, but and the second way can be to, and which is also a more practical one, is by learning by the experiences of those who've experienced it, the experiences of those great seers and sages so many years back, and we can learn, and their learnings we can find them in canonical texts and ancient writings, and studying those might be very helpful in understanding the true nature of consciousness. So, as far as I've studied those ancient scriptures, I think that they are suggestive of a very simple thing, that consciousness is nothing else other than a fundamental building block to the universe. So I think the time has come that in this 21st century that we include a new fundamental, which is consciousness, along with space, time, matter and energy, which may solve many of our problems. Thank you.